Welcome to a Q&A with K. I'm your boy, Kevin James Simmons, you already know, and I am with the lovely, beautiful, my sister, Dominique Nicole Simmons. Dominique, why don't you say hello?
Hello.
All right, so before we get started, we're going to just talk about some microaggressions and talk about systemic racism to kind of conclude our Black History Month emails. And before we do that, I just want Dominique to introduce herself and talk about what she does and where she's at in life.
Well, my name is Dominique, like Kevin just told you guys. Much like you all, then Kevin, this is for speech therapy students.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, much like you guys, I also work in rehabilitation. I'm a physical therapist working out of Atlanta. I work primarily in outpatient orthopedics, but I have experience also working in hospitals alongside speech therapists. So, kind of getting to see some of what you guys do. I love that my brother is going into healthcare alongside me, which is really, really fun. He and I talk all the time about just different conditions and disorders that patients might have. I ask him questions now about some of the things that I've learned in school, but that you guys are definitely the experts on. So it's been really, really interesting just to kind of hear his perspective on different interventions and signs and symptoms, and we can just sort of nerd out on the central nervous system and things like that. It's been really, really cool.
Yeah, for sure. I've been pressing into my classmates to kind of go that extra step. So learn about the history and then what can you do as an advocate and ally. So some of the themes that we've been working on is learning about microaggressions, like I talked about, and systemic racism, and like what is that and why it's so prevalent now. Dominique, a microaggression, as you know, is a statement, action, or incident regarded as an instance of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group. So examples include you're lucky to be black, so easy to get into college. So I know you and I and our brother Derek have heard that a lot. And then I want you to speak on this one. I know you get this a lot. Is you're light skinned, and so I remember you told me that people are like, "Hey, what are you? Are you mixed? Are you?" So kind of go into that microaggression so my classmates understand that it's still happening and occurring and leading to this systemic racism that's built into our nation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you know, I've been in situations where patients might ask, what are you, or where are you from? And whether it was meant to be offensive or not, it's a matter of why does it matter? And also on top of that, it's when I tell them or I tell somebody, oh, I'm black or I'm African American, and the response is, oh, really? Or are you sure? Have you, as if that's not okay, as if that's not good enough. So that can definitely be one that's interesting. I think another one would be people saying that you're so articulate.
Yeah.
Usually it's meant as a compliment, but when you're talking to a person who has worked hard for more than one degree, or they're your healthcare provider, you would hope that they, are articulate and intelligent, regardless of their background or their race or their gender or any of those things. You would That's what you would want. You would want them to be an expert in their field. So why would you expect anything less
Yeah.
from that person? So I think those are two of the probably more interesting ones,
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, that's good. Systemic racism facts that we go over, which is a structural or institutional racism in place of a system and structure that have procedures or processes that place African Americans at disadvantage. Um, so here are some of the things that, again, I was not so surprised because we live in this society and we're placed at disadvantages wherever we go. And dad and mom have always talked to us being a black individual, in a white society, we have to work 10 times as hard. So that's why I'm proud of you, for getting your degree. And, I always talk with you. That's why I'm working so hard because there are things in place to stop us, to halt um, our education. But here's one of them: Black people make up half of the homeless population, despite making up 13% of the U.S. population. All right, think about that. And then redlining, so a system used by banks in the real estate industry in the 20th century to determine which neighborhoods would get loans to buy homes in neighborhoods where people of color lived. Um, that happened in the 20th century and around the 1900s to 2000. But Nisi, that wasn't too long ago when they passed legislation in 1970 to stop the segregation of American cities, including our hometown, Atlanta, Houston, Detroit, have very pronounced black and white neighborhoods. And again, this is a stat that you and I are, you know, we're not so surprised because even though we live in a white neighborhood, um, the surrounding areas is distinct. Black cities, black populations, and where's the healthcare, where's the resources where they can get loans, is kind of put at a halt. So you can see that although it's not explicit redlining, the system is in place, has put our people at a disadvantage. Um, Another example is in sports. So in football, the Rooney Rule was adopted in 2003 to require every team with a head coaching vacancy to interview at least one or more diverse candidates. All right, so Nisi, around 70% of NFL players are black, and of the 32 teams, there are 5 minority head coaches, only 3 which are black.
I mean, I played volleyball, which is not a very black dominated sport.
Mm-hmm.
um, so, you know, I had to learn a lot from other people about what was important to do in volleyball. I mean, I didn't know. Really, it was our mom who just did a ton of research, talked to a ton of different people, and found out that, hey, if Dominique wants to play volleyball in college, she has to play club sports. But had mom not gone out and done that research, I mean, I might have been stuck just playing high school volleyball, which would not have done me really any good because with high school volleyball, their seasons are the exact same season as college volleyball. So if you want to get seen, you have to play club volleyball because they don't, while you're in season in high school, they're also in season in college. So if you don't have access to that information, or if you don't have someone like our mom who's willing to do that research and ask around and figure out what does my daughter need to do, what does she need to do, then you may not have that same opportunity.
Yeah.
It's really about having access to those resources and being able to get into the rooms where those conversations are being had.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you bring up a good point, and it's those resources that we talked about. So we see it in sports, we see it um, in work environments, but even in school, the systemic racism is ingrained. Where, to your point, in high school, you're not going to get those resources. We went to a predominantly white high school, and if our mom wasn't an advocate to get you out there and see other people, your place where is, oh, Dominique, you're black, like, don't you want to play basketball? And I'm positive you've heard that track and field, they it's the
The
microaggressions.
number one sport that people guess that I play as a tall African
Yeah,
American woman
yeah,
is basketball.
yeah, for sure.
I mean, it's every time, and I'll tell people, oh no, I played college volleyball, and I'll say, oh, but did you play basketball too? Yes, in high school, but I played college volleyball.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does come up.
Is that Oreo?
Yes.
All right, just a couple more. So this last one, you ready to get uncomfortable? All right, so this last one is on the Confederate flag. All right, so the flag represents the Confederate States of America created in 1861. Okay, so 11 southern states felt threatened by the election of President Abraham Lincoln, and Lincoln argued that slavery should not be extended into new territories of the U.S. So the 11 states seceded from the 85-year-old nation. Okay, so the Union, and you got the Confederates. So Southerners feared that slavery in their states would be Lincoln's next target. And so, Nisi, the next thing that occurred is the Civil War. And the Confederates were defeated. But and I don't want to cause any drama or anything. I want to educate people about you and our stories, want to educate about our history. But I do want to say this: what scares me as a black man when I see people who fly the Confederate flag, they fly it because of Southern pride. That's their thing, Southern pride. And it's scary because it's like, okay, well, if you know the history of that flag, and you're saying that Southern pride, is a huge thing. Like, no, I want to rep my colors and stuff like that. But if you know that the Confederates were literally fighting for slavery, and they felt threatened because Lincoln was trying to abolish it, I, it shouldn't it spark conversations? Shouldn't it, be one thing where it's not, oh, let's spew out hate towards this individual who's trying to um, get rid of that hate towards black and brown people, um, but it's not. So, like, as we conclude, like, what are your thoughts on uh, the Confederate flag, on systemic racism? Like, what would you say to our white friends, our white advocates, how they can help with pursuit of racial justice?
Um, I will say, especially from the perspective of a healthcare provider, be aware of your bias. We all have bias, whether you want to think that you don't or not. We all have bias, but recognizing your bias can really go a long way in making you a better healthcare provider. Um, there was a study done in 2016. I forgot exactly where it was published. And Kevin, if I find it, I'll send it to you, so you can add in later. But they found that 40% of first and second year medical students thought that Black people or African American people have thicker skin than white people. And so that study was done to really try to understand, why are different people's pain perceived differently. I believe it was that same study found that when Black people were hospitalized, they were 22% less likely than their white counterparts or their white peers to receive pain medication. So when you recognize things like that, when you recognize your bias and you take action to change that, it can really change how you care about your patients, because you would never tell one patient, or you never, hopefully never, tell their family, well, the person next, in the room next door also has, dysarthria, and they're not acting like this. It's, I would really hope that you would never do that. And one thing that you'll start to see as you exit the classroom and start going into, clinical practice, is that a lot of things that are learned in school are not always relevant for the patient in front of you. You have to understand that a lot of, clinical trials and case studies and things like that, they were done in a controlled environment. They were done with people that were, maybe very healthy, or only had one comorbidity, or had never been injured before. And so while that doesn't discredit the fact that that research was good and that it can be helpful, if you're not willing to adapt to the person in front of you, you may not ever get them whole, or you may not ever get them well. So you have to be willing to say, you know what? Yes, I love using this technique with all my other patients. Yes, it's very effective, but maybe for this person, it might not work. And so you have to be willing to step back and recognize, how you're addressing different people, how you're addressing people culturally, religiously, their gender, their race, all of these different things go into effect. It's about the person in front of you. And so I think recognizing that and acknowledging that will really, really change who you are as a healthcare professional.
Wow, that's fantastic. I appreciate that. I think that will hit home for a lot of people, and yeah, that was beautifully said. I would have said it better, but I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That was really good. Thank you, Nisi. This was great. Just wanted to keep it short, and sweet, but If you don't have anything, that's it for me.
That's all I got.
All right. Again, thank you guys for another Q&A with Kay. I'm your boy Kevin James Simmons. Peace.